Today we have Yvonne Posey. Is that how you say your last name?
That's correct.
Great. And April is joining us today as well. We get her two times in a
Hello.
row. Yay.
Woo!
Woo. So Yvonne, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us your story.
My name is Yvonne Posey. I am a dental hygienist. I've been a dental hygienist for 23 years. Before my experience in dental hygiene, I worked in human services. So I worked with school age parents who come with lots of challenges, usually in multiples. And it was a really rewarding work. But in Wisconsin in the middle 90s, a bunch of stuff changed as regards service provision. And I worked for an organization that got all of their money through grant funding. Every penny was grant funding. And a huge chunk of that was federal funding. And when the that kind of service provision changed in Wisconsin, all like two-thirds of our budget got sucked into that new programming. Um, and 80 of us caseworkers or so across the state, we all lost our jobs at the same time. And the next job offer that came was from the county for more hours, less pay, worse benefits, and more travel and a heavier caseload. And I just felt like that was too backward. I'd spent 7 years in the field and I did not want to. And we were right at the cusp of when you're going to need a master's degree in order to keep working in the field. And I wasn't really prepared to pay $15,000 to go back to school with no guarantee that I would be able to recoup that money in earn wage earnings. So I started to do some research about what was going to be the next chapter of my life. And I ran into a wonderful librarian at my local technical college. It was the closest place that had a good, big library that had a lot of reference material because I lived kind of in a rural area at the time. And I explained to her what I was doing. I was there doing some career research. She pointed me in the right direction in the stacks to find the books that I was looking for. And when I was all done, I thanked her and she said, "So what did you find?" And I had kind of settled on four things. I was interested in nursing, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and dental hygiene. Well, my local technical college had some version of all of those, but three of the four had huge long wait lists, and dental hygiene had just started a program. And I was like, I don't want to wait 5 years for clinicals for those other things. I'm ready to go as soon as possible because I knew the pink slip was coming. It hadn't come yet, but it was months in the offing, and I needed to make some decisions. I had a young family. And so I applied for the hygiene program and got waitlisted. And it was a tiny program. They only took 6 students a year. It was itty bitty.
Wow, that is
And
small.
so I was nine on the wait list, nine in the ninth position for those 6 spots. But the three people ahead of me had circumstances where they couldn't start. So I got in right away. I applied in October, got waitlisted in February, and got accepted in April and started in August. And then my layoff came in November. So I worked part time and went to school full time essentially. And then my layoff came and so then I determined, again, because I had a young family and my husband was supporting all three of us. And so I was like, I need to get done as quick as I can. So I had one semester of 17 credits, one semester of 18 credits, and a summer session of 9 credits in order to squeeze everything into the 2 years that the technical program was. Fortunately, they took some of my bachelor's stuff, but yeah, all of the other stuff was like, get it done in 2 years. So got done and got a job actually before I took my licensure exam and I have been in love with dental hygiene ever since.
And do you still love it today?
I still love it today. I still love the clinical side today. Um, and almost right away, I was always the hygienist who got the freaky, scared patients. I think having that social work background informed my ability to understand what was happening on some level, mostly intuitively at that time. And over time, I could convert those patients. And then in the early 2000s, I ran across some research that had been done right around the same time that I got laid off from my job and started school around what's called the science of safe relationship. A medical doctor's graduate students were looking at the prevalence of childhood trauma and how that impacts the neurobiology of the person who's experienced that trauma. And I realized the same things that were common in those patients that either had childhood trauma or some kind of traumatic event or multiple traumatic events in their lives were the same ways that my anxious patients were presenting. And then I also, uh, like some other research came out around the same time, that was looking at how frequent do adults have some history of complex trauma. And that research was on a national level, and then every single state after that repeated their version of a study in the states and corroborated what the national study brought out. That national study had a sample size of about not quite 18,000 participants in this study. I wrongly assumed, well, they must have gone to like underserved communities or people who were marginalized and gathered this information. That was incorrect. 70% of the participants were college educated and of European backgrounds, so Caucasian. What they found was 61% of men and 51% of women had at least one experience with a childhood trauma. 80% of that group that reported one had at least one more. Women in that sample group were 50% more likely to have five or more. So women, we tend to look at trauma a little differently. Those half of those women said, "Oh yeah," when first asked, "Yeah, I've had at least one." But then as they went through the questionnaire, they found out that half at least 50% women are 50% more likely to have at least five or more. And when we have four or more, that study showed higher incidence of autoimmune disorders, things like diabetes, heart disease, chronic breathing diseases, anxiety, depression, lower ability to earn wages, difficulty in relationships, all because those people had been exposed to complex trauma. And again, my patients exhibited some of the same medical history things and physical presentation that the study showed that those individuals who've been exposed to trauma had. So, like, all of this stuff started to mix together in my head. And I was like, okay, that's nice, but what do I do with that knowledge? How do I make practical application so that the next time I go into the clinic, I can do things a little differently to shorten the time it takes to convert an anxious patient to someone who can handle dental treatment? So, again, more research, more digging, and I basically came up with a system to evaluate medical histories, look at people when they physically present. When I first see them in the waiting room for the first time, we're strangers. You stand up in the waiting room after I call your name and I watch what happens to your body. And based on what happens when I see you in the waiting room, I now know whether or not you are in a healthy autonomic nervous system state, a healthy um, uh, where are you on the ladder of an activated nervous system? And then now I know what to do as we head back to the treatment room and as we engage in that treatment relationship to make you feel safe so you can get through your treatment.
Wow, that's a lot of, good information. So, first of all, I'll go way back to the beginning. So with your degree, it's crazy that you would have to go in general in society that you have to get such a high degree to work for something that you can't make money at. Like teachers have to get such high degrees and they can't ever make it back. So I don't think that's fair.
Yeah,
Anyway, and then and for you to have the foresight of knowing you're going to be laid off and being proactive to get into dental hygiene school and to get into school with only 9 spots, that it's
yeah.
hard enough.
6 spots. I was
Six
ninth on the
spots.
list.
Oh my
Six.
gosh. Okay, that's right. You're on the wait
Yeah,
list. So that is incredible. And then it must be a good school too to have 6 students in there to have that, that training.
yeah,
And then you're talking about being intuitive, knowing if your patients are scared. And I think that's how I am too. So I don't know how much of that is intuition or body language. You're talking about their like their gait when they're walking into the room, and that's something we
yeah,
learn in hygiene school too. And I'm sure assisting school right away you could tell their health by their gait.
yeah.
But I don't know if that's body language, intuitive, kind of a combination of all. Some of
Both.
us are
Yeah,
more intuitive naturally, I think. So
yeah.
um,
I agree.
that's pretty cool. So I just wanted to pretty much re-say everything you said. April, she might have the lawnmower going in the back. Sometimes she has somebody shaving her legs for her during the podcast episode, so we have to keep her on mute. And I'm doing a commercial for Diet Coke today. They're our new sponsor. Just kidding.
Ah,
No, she's getting
Sorry,
choppy
ladies, I'm
reception.
back. Yeah, I keep getting choppy reception, so here I am.
Sorry, usually we're a little more
So
professional.
that's oh, sorry. um, so yeah, Yvonne, it's pretty impressive that you're able to merge those 2 degrees that you have together
yeah.
to start this business.
It was quite accidental. It was a matter of like, I didn't know I was going to marry the two at the beginning. I just knew I was changing careers, and somehow those skills from that old job that I did, old field that I was in, came forward with me. And it wasn't until, maybe, you know, I'd say less than 10 years ago, when I came across, that the really interesting, couple pieces of research that really helped me understand why I got what was happening with my patients. Because I too had, some history of my own with childhood trauma. I think that sometimes can make you intuitive as well. So you can kind of read people's very subtle cues, and be able to respond to them, one, in a way that keeps you safe, but two, in a way that, would potentially like de-escalate a negative situation. Because, sometimes when your anxious patients come in, they're up here. They're like, 10 out of 10. And anything you might do could set them off and they could have a really negative reaction. You ever get that person that almost makes you want to cry because they're so um, aggressive or mean when you have to treat them?
Yeah.
So, sometimes, just those subtle cues can help you potentially de escalate a potentially difficult situation with your patients.
And to understand that it's not you, it's
Hmm.
something in their past. And I love those patients too because I mean, I'm sad that they feel that way, but I love being able to comfort them and understand, maybe not understand exactly what their issue is, but just letting them know. And sometimes just putting your hand on their shoulder or something there just like
Yes.
comforts them.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
traumas that could be different. I don't know what your trauma was, but and so you're not just talking about dental trauma. There's just traumas in life. And I don't know. I have a trauma, let's say for Star Trek. Sorry, April. And so if I see Spock, I just automatically I just freak out. I don't know why. I probably don't want to know why, but things like that or 50s music, some 50s music. And so it might not even be the dentist or it might not be anything, but it might be music
Absolutely.
playing in the background or something like that. So there's so many different things going on.
Yep.
Do you ask your patients or do you just kind of naturally, intuitively speak to them and help them through it?
So I don't typically ask specifically about, traumatic experiences they've been in, but again, like their body language and their health history. And, sometimes some of our questionnaires will ask a patient, have you had any negative dental experiences? Do you have any, is there anything that we can do to make your visit feel more comfortable? And they will sometimes, if you can read between the lines, will reveal something that will tell you that this dental setting is triggering for them. Because think about it, if it's simply a dental trauma, not simply, but if you've had a dental trauma, laying in the chair in a vulnerable position with a near stranger in an intimate space can be triggering. Or like you had mentioned, 50s music. What if some music that comes on reminds them of something, a car accident they were in, or a grandparent that they've lost, or some other sort of difficult event where they had a hard time bouncing back from? So, that position that they're in and what we're doing in an intimate space can bring back those issues, concerns, experiences, and now you've got somebody with an activated nervous system in your chair, and you've got to cope with that.
Now, do you have an approximate number of practices you've been in to counsel them or consult with them to work on speaking with these types of patients?
Yeah. So in the last 2 years, I've worked as a sub of somebody that I know had a staffing agency. She brought me on. And so now I've been exposed to, for the last 2 years, like literal strangers, not my patients of record, not the patients I'd seen for 13 years to help care for them, through these different circumstances. And so, being that I've gotten the opportunity to be in so many different places, now half a dozen offices have asked me to come in and teach these skills. So it's been really rewarding, not just to work one on one with patients, but to really impact providers on a wider scale, because now that more providers know, more patients are going to be positively impacted by knowing these skills. So, yeah, just really excited to watch this whole thing blossom in the industry.
Yeah, and it's such an important thing with all of the like the sleep dentistry, and I work for dentists that uses a lot of sedation
Yep,
because there's so many patients that are nervous. So
yep,
to have somebody that train the team to help the patients, so then you could keep some patients too without having to refer them to specialists
yep.
and have
That's
patients
exactly
actually come
right.
through and follow up with treatment.
Yep,
And it's
because
really hard to work with
specialists,
patients that
those
are
reactions,
drugged up. Yeah.
yeah, those specialists tend to have a harder time, because they aren't, it might be a one off thing that you go for to a specialist for. They're not a long term patient of record. And so that kind of dental anxiety tends to be worse in those specialty practices. So, again, like you said, if you can work with those patients in your practice, um, that you already have established a rapport or a relationship with them, that can help them keep from being as activated as easily.
Yeah. So you go into practices and help train teams, and then do you
Yes.
do speaking or provide any courses or anything like that?
Courses are coming. Speaking engagements are opening up as well. An office that I was just in not too long ago, he asked me to come. He does a local component of the Seattle Study Club. So I'll be doing some work for him with his Seattle Study Club. And we're hoping that down the road that can branch out into national exposure of this topic in other Seattle Study Club components. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
fantastic. But you don't actually go to Seattle, right? You
No,
fly
not
to
not with
we're pretty
COVID.
close.
No.
Yeah. So we're
Yeah,
gonna have an
they
event
have
here in
taken a lot of that online. So
yeah. We're gonna have an event here in Portland soon, so maybe we can work out something. You can come and teach, come and
that
do a
is my
course.
favorite part of the country. I would love that.
Yeah, good. We'll have to send you some information when we have all the some more details for sure.
Great.
I was going to ask you about your LinkedIn background photo. It looked like the gorge here, but where was that?
That was Lake Como, Italy.
Oh, I was going to say because I saw the orange roofs. It's like, oh, it looks like the gorge, but I see the houses. It's not, but
Yeah.
yeah,
So
very
that's
pretty.
my other passion is travel. I love, love, love to travel.
Me
So
too. This must have been a rough year last year for you, huh?
yes, it was
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah.
A friend and I have tentatively um, decided to take a trip to. She has a daughter who used to live in Australia. So we're taking a trip to Australia and New Zealand, hopefully in November if everything works out.
That would be fantastic. I've never been there. Yeah, April was supposed to be in Italy?
Italy.
Yeah. She's supposed to be
I
on
was
a
going to go home.
Vespa.
Yeah, I have a Vespa,
Oh,
yeah,
she
but I
yeah,
was
she is on a Vespa. Just
yeah,
not in Italy with a scarf.
right. No, I was supposed to do a homestay to teach English for 2 months.
Oh,
I'm hoping to revisit that
it would be
at some point.
wonderful. Whereabouts in Italy?
It was going to be in Florence, but
Mm.
actually, it wasn't COVID. Isn't the reason I didn't go? It just happened to coincide. But I'm going to look at Spain instead
It's because
because I
she
love
was
Spain.
drunk
I've
at
been
her interview.
what's
It's
that?
because
Yeah,
you were
she
drunk
accused
on your
me
interview.
of you. Yeah,
Anyway, it's just a
yeah,
joke from a
yeah. It's I'll
yeah,
have to tell you the story later. But
previous episode.
yes,
Oh, sorry, back to the story. So traveling, do you travel all over then normally? 'Cause it sounds like you've been to Italy.
Like Europe is kind of my favorite spot. I've gotten to visit France and Italy and Germany and Austria, Ireland. So yeah, I love, 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 love Europe. I have a
I
dear
wanna go.
friend who lives in Sweden. She keeps trying to talk me into coming there. So maybe that'll be something that'll work out sometime.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'd love to go out to all of those places. So
Mhm.
hopefully soon, I'm sure.
maybe
So yeah.
I say that'd be a great opportunity, Yvonne, for you to speak internationally about
That would
this
be
with
wonderful.
offices
Would
overseas.
love that. Yeah, I was
Mhm.
working for a little while with a dental therapist in the UK. They kind of have a little different model than we do here. So dental therapists can place resins. So they kind of have like the dental surgeon who does prosthetics, crowns, bridges, extractions, oral surgery. And then the dental therapists do hygiene and then resins, kind of like our model in Washington State. Um, but they run their own practices. They're not under the supervision of a dentist. They usually work in like, well, up until this point, I've kind of been like a spa sort of clinic setting, although that's shifting. Um, so yeah, that would be great at some point to take the whole conversation international as well.
Yes. So tell us more about your about patient fears and
Yeah.
uh the okay, we'll break this off the podcast because I don't want to sound stupid, but because you were talking about more of the brain action. I'm on cold meds too. If I got my nice spring cold, so that's why my
Oh,
voice is extra sexy today. So yeah, tell us more about the brain and the development and all that
yeah.
super exciting stuff.
So there is neurobiology behind the way your patient presents physically and psychologically, your activated patient. So, kind of just a quick little sort of brain anatomy. There is a small almond shaped organ that is in the near the brain stem. It's called the amygdala. It's kind of like the fire alarm of the brain. Is basically searching, scanning the environment to see if there's any potential threats. The amygdala of someone who's been exposed to either dental trauma or like trauma in the dental suite or some other sort of complex style trauma. Um, they have that amygdala is firing all the time. It assumes everything it sees is some potential threat. So the hippocampus, which is near that organ, has the job of storing memories. So based on the information that is coming into the body, the hippocampus writes a story about it's dangerous to go to the dentist. The hippocampus's job is to send information to the prefrontal cortex so that can make decisions about what to do based on what's been detected in the environment. So then that's kind of in the midbrain. In the brain stem is, if you remember your cranial nerve anatomy, cranial nerve 10 is called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is also called the wanderer because it does things like controls the swallow response, it feeds the heart, the lungs, the digestive tract, handles a lot of other um, uh, uh, systems that run the body. The vagus nerve is a two-way nerve, like most are. However, the 80% of the information transferred is from the body to the brain. 20% goes back from the brain to the body. So we have our fire alarm amygdala going off. The hippocampus has written a story about it's dangerous to go to the dentist. When a patient comes into that dental setting, smells the caticide, or back in the day when we used to use eugenol, right? Your zinc oxide eugenol, that smell, or hears a drill, or gets in the chair and sees that bright light over them. Those are all, if they've had a negative experience, either again in the dental suite or they've got an activated nervous system from something else, and all of those cues are now signaling, I'm not safe. So your patient who's activated, Deb Dana, who's a licensed clinical social worker who took the work of Stephen Porges, is the one who posited what's called the Polybagel Theory, that this nerve has three actions. Either a person is going to have a healthy autonomic nervous system state, they can engage with you, they can have a conversation, they can make eye contact, they'll face their body toward you when they're talking. They'll have good posture when they stand up out of the chair. They're going to stand up straight, shoulders back, and be able to meet you with eye contact and have a conversation with you. That's a healthy, autonomic, sympathetic nervous system state. Someone who's more activated, they're a little lower down on this ladder. They're in that parasympathetic fight flight response. the amygdala's firing, the hippocampus is writing a story, the vagus nerve saying, like, this whole thing is not safe. And it's sending signals of I'm not safe to that vagus nerve, who now is assigned to tell you to do something based on this signal of safety: run, flee, or fight. That fight flight response. You may get somebody who's curt with their answers, they're snarky when they answer you. So that indicates that they're more activated. Further down on the ladder is going to be somebody who can't make eye contact with you, can only give you one sentence or very short sentence answers. They don't want to face their body towards you when they're talking. You cannot connect with them because they're in this lowest freeze response of that autonomic ladder. And so, like I said, when a patient comes in, you call their name. If they stand up and make brief eye contact with you and then split off, or subconsciously they're covering all of the organs innervated by the vagus nerve, you'll watch their shoulders come down and in because they're subconsciously protecting those organs at the vagus, because the vagus nerve has gotten all its information, I'm not safe, and it's sent information back to the body, protect yourself. And so you'll watch every time I'll watch their shoulders do that, or they'll look off from me because when a predator looks you in the eye, what do? You don't stand and stare them down, you look off. So some of these early protective mechanisms that our brain and body combine together to do, you'll watch your patients do that right in the waiting room. And then when they're sitting in the chair, the same thing. So my goal, three goals when it comes to any patient, whether they're activated or not. First, to validate their experience, if it's good or bad. Never to shame them, make them feel bad about, it's been a long time since you've been here. Where have you been? That kind of thing. I heard somebody do this in an operatory not too long ago. So I see you've been gone for a long time. What's up? And immediately that patient was like, my mom died and I've been dealing with life. So yeah, I didn't come to the dentist. So that's a big T trauma. She lost a parent. She spent 2 years away from the dentist because she was sorting through the probate of her mother's estate, and then, her anxiety and depression over the loss of a parent. Now it's been a year, it's been 18 months. Now I'm ashamed because it's been so long since I've been in. Now she gets in the chair and someone does exactly what she's afraid is going to happen. So validate that patient. That's the first and most important goal, is to validate whatever their experience is and not shame them for it. Get their permission before I do anything, before I take a health history, before I let them know doc has ordered x-rays. Always getting their permission, and then creating a safe space for them to be whoever they need to be in that chair within boundaries, right? I'm not going to allow myself to get activated or to be negatively impacted by whatever you've got going on. Creating that safe space for you and for me in that treatment relationship. So those are the three most important things with a patient. Validate them, don't shame them, get their permission for whatever it is you're going to do, and then create safe space for them. Create that rapport where they know they're safe in your chair.
Yeah, I love it.
That's
And some of
yeah,
the
that's
hy
really good advice, yeah.
oh, so some of the hygienists, like you were talking about, they were shaming them for not coming in. Do you, feel that they're taking it personal? Like, it's me, it's about me, it's all about me, it's my time, it's this, they're thinking inward instead of thinking about the patient and understanding that it's about the patient, and don't yeah, we know you have an hour to get everything done. The patient hasn't been in for a year. You know what? You don't have to do everything. They came in the door. That's the first step. That's what I tell them. I'm like, well, you're here now. Let's get you back on track. It's okay. And in my mind, I'm like, if they're super dirty, that's fine. I'll do what I can today and have them come back. At least they're warmed up and they made it this far. And don't make it about you. And, it's not about you.
Yes, that's exactly right, April and Cindy. That's exactly right. You and we know when they've been gone for a long time, it's going to be a more difficult process. If we're responsible, we're not going to try to push to get everything done or a spit shine in that hour. We're going to make sure they know what the situation is. I just had somebody use this word recently. She said, "This is the most validating dental experience I've ever had." Well, that good, because that's how it's supposed to be. So, make sure they understand that I'm an advocate for them. I am not a rule maker for them. I'm not trying to put a bunch of extra stuff on them. I want them to leave that experience knowing um, their health is important to me. Their comfort in that space is important to me. You said, like they came in the door. Like, how hard is it sometimes to pick up the phone and do the scary thing you don't want to do? But they did. Picked up the phone, they scheduled an appointment. Maybe they were so scared they canceled that first appointment and they rescheduled. They were brave enough to reschedule after they canceled the first time. Then they come in the door. Then, after they check in, they don't freak out and leave. They actually come back to your operatory with you. Like, they have already done the big hard stuff. Now you get the opportunity to hold their hand and walk them through the rest of what's even more scary to them. Laying back in the chair, letting you look in their mouth, and hopefully not judge them based on what you see.
How have the doctors themselves been receptive to training versus like the staff?
Yeah, your people, right? You know the people who get what you're talking about, and you know the people who are going to resist what you're talking about. Not every person is my people, right? Like I was just saying, that experience I had, he was a specialist that I gave this talk to for his local Seattle Study Club component. I had subbed in his office one day, and he said to me, "Are you looking for a job? Because, like, one, we need somebody, and two, I like the way that you interact with patients." And I said no, and explained why. And he said, "Can you tell me more? Because, like, nobody's talking about that." And I was like, "Yeah, I know." So after 5 minutes of explaining the science of safe relationship with him, he was like, I need to have you back here to have a talk." First, I gave a talk to his staff, and then to his local component. So and on that first visit, I had a 45 minutes. They were on their lunch. I had 45 minutes to sort of explain the bare bones of it, and that's when he made the decision. One, I need you to come back and give a talk to my group, and then I want to introduce you to the guy that does this nationally. So immediately he understood it, and his staff, for the most part. There was one hygienist who I could tell during the course of the program she was like a little resistant, but by the end of the talk, I asked her, I was like, "Do you feel like, this was relevant? Did you get anything good out of it?" And she said, "Yeah, you know what? Absolutely. Yes, I did." So sometimes people, you just like with your anxious patients, if you validate them, if you make them feel safe, I made it clear that I wasn't there to tell her what to do or change anything that she was doing, but to validate, the great things that were already happening in her interactions with her patients. And she was converted by the end of that 45 minutes. So it's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to be ready to um, embrace your patient's difficulty. Not everybody, everybody's not suited to that. And that's okay. But those that are, you know, so when I got done with my talk, and I made clear at the end, like, here are three things you can do. Actually, it was five things you can do on your next shift, your next clinic day. And by the time we were done, they had to go back and see afternoon patients. And he's like, "I feel like I can use this now." So the information that I'm teaching is really, really actionable. I want you to be able to use what you learn with your very next patient, even if they're anxious or not. This applies to everybody. We can validate all of our patients, those that do have great oral hygiene and are consistent with their visits, don't have a lot of anxiety over it, and those that do. I mean, these principles work no matter who you're working with, because every human wants to feel validated. Nobody wants to feel shamed or blamed for the situation that they're in. So these principles work,
Yeah.
um,
And
with your
sometimes
highly
you
activated patients or not.
yeah, sometimes you can't tell. Sometimes people will be so perfect. Like this girl will come in absolutely gorgeous, perfect, not an eyebrow out of place, teeth are extremely clean. But I know I'm like, well, there has to be something wrong with her because, why is she trying to be so perfect?
Yeah.
In the
And
past,
why is
it'd be
she
like,
gripping the chair when she thinks
yes,
I don't
because
notice?
she needs to be validated. Nobody probably tells her that she's pretty or that her teeth are clean. They just assume she knows. So to
Yeah.
tell her that she's doing a good job, everybody needs to be validated. Like you were saying, you don't know what
Yeah.
everybody's trauma is or what their issues are. So I
Isn't
like
that
that.
true?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then when you're talking to teams, because April and I do some consulting too and training teams, uh, and I've been, we've all been there too, where you have a consultant come in or a trainer, and you kind of get defensive at first, like, oh, somebody's going to, know more than I do, whatever. Of course, somebody's going to, and so it's kind of natural for some people to not want to hear or learn. I mean, I love to, but not everybody's at that
Mhm.
stage. And
Yeah.
so, like you're saying, treat them like that patient that needs to be validated. I like that because that's
Yeah.
very common. You have to win them over as well because they all
So
right away they have their hand up before you even have a chance to speak, right?
yeah, even before I go into an office, I send a little, basically like a little survey that helps me understand, what kind of experience do each of your team members have? What do they wish they knew about anxious patients? Tell me about an experience that you've had with one recently. So I try to gauge where each, and I'm hoping when I send that survey, almost always everybody, because I keep it short, it's like 8 questions. So you can get it done. If your experience is pretty short, you can get it done in less than 10 minutes. So I'm trying to gather information before I go into that office to determine, like, where is the staff at? What do they need? What do they wish they had? What are some of the challenges with dealing with anxious patients? Typically, it's like it takes a long time. Like, it takes a lot to work through all the difficulties those anxious patients have. And so that's why it's so important to me, before I'm done with a presentation, I want you to have simple things that you can teach your patients in a minute or less, that's going to deactivate their nervous system response.
This have you seen any how these techniques have actually worked for the staff members themselves?
We
Like
talk about
in your
that.
office? Yeah.
Yeah, we do talk about that. It's actually, that's a really important key, because we have to stay grounded when our patients aren't. Right. And so I spend a decent amount of time in each presentation talking about what kinds of things can you do to stay grounded when your patient's not grounded. And then how does that impact your inner office relationships? Because we're humans too. Like, we're coming with our difficulties. We may be dealing with a sick child, or difficulty in our marriage, or financial issues, right? All of those things activate us too. And sometimes your stuff may crash into my stuff. And so we now have to figure out how not to escalate, our each of our own activated nervous systems.
So it sounds like it's a all around good, well rounded training for everybody.
That's my goal, because I love what I do. I want to keep doing what I do as long as I can keep doing what I do. And if people want to stay in it, but this is the thing that makes it hard, let's solve that. Let's figure out how to solve that so you can keep on loving what you do and keep doing what you love to do.
Yes, we don't all have to run from hygiene or from dentistry. That's what everybody's running. It's like, no, you don't have to. Let's make it better. Let's fix things and let's make it better. That's kind of silly
Yeah. I
to
mean,
talk
even
about
though I
those
do
things.
this training, I don't really have the desire to leave the op. Like, I may work less, um, because there's only so many places you can be,
Right, right.
but I don't want to leave the op. Like, I've been
Yeah.
doing this. I want to do this till I stop working.
Mhm.
Some people, like you say, you hear all the time, escape the op, or get out of the op, or, get out of the box. It's like,
Yeah.
I like my op. I don't
So,
really want to
yeah.
leave my op.
Do you get divorced every time? I mean, every time? You gotta work things out. It's just like it's a relationship, right?
Right.
Yeah. And if it is bad, yeah, get divorced, leave that office. Doesn't mean you have to
Right.
leave your career. And if you want to, that's great too. And
Mhm.
April's worked in endo for quite a few years in the past. So she's probably seen a lot of patients that have these issues because there's some reason that they get to that point, and
Mm.
then
Oh yeah,
uh,
especially
people have a fear of root canals.
yeah, yeah, because root canals we all know have a bad reputation. And of course the endodontist I work for, it was painless, and a lot of the patients are like, I felt nothing. I don't know what people were talking about. Why is it a bad reputation? And we explain, well, it's the pain beforehand that people associate it with, or a root canal that went bad, unfortunately, but in the past. But yeah, it was interesting, or even like the rubber dam, people feeling encroached upon, claustrophobic. hmm I mean, there's extreme cases where we had to put them under anesthesia, conscious sedation to get the work done.
Yeah.
There's some sort of trigger for them that really upset them.
And sometimes we don't know. It may have been something that we did or said or they heard or felt. We have no idea what it is, but once we're in that situation, we've got to figure out how to de-escalate it so that they can stay safe and we can stay safe too.
Right. So what are some of the tricks that you have or that you teach to help these patients?
Is just gauging where a patient's at. If they can't make eye contact, don't force them, right? Oftentimes, when I'm doing that initial interview with a patient when they first come into my operatory, I'm trying to figure out, like, what are their concerns? Gathering more information about those concerns, then talking about the health history. Like, if you can't look at me, I'm not going to force you to look at me. I'm gonna sit, knee to knee with you, but not necessarily stare you down, right? Um, the trigeminal nerve, which is the fifth cranial nerve, has receptors for facial expression and tone of voice. So if my facial expression and my tone of voice feels safe to you, it's going to be easier for you to open up and answer questions and engage. We're going to be able to move you up on that autonomic nervous system ladder because my voice and my face, even a neutral face in someone who is activated, feels like a threat. So you don't have to have a grumpy face. You can just have a neutral face. If they have a face you can't, you have a facial expression they can't read, it can be perceived as a threat. So making sure you have, a facial expression that looks warm and inviting and that your tone of voice, how like someone says something nice, but you can hear the snark under it? Your trigeminal nerve is responsible for you being able to tell the difference. They might have a nice face, and they may have said nice words, but that trigeminal nerve picked up that was not a nice tone of voice.
Yeah, it's that not body language, but that intuition or just nonverbal communication.
Nonverbal
It's
communication.
not
Your
all about what you
trigeminal
say.
nerve has receptors
Mhm.
to distinguish, is that a safe tone of voice? Is that a safe facial expression or not? And it takes less than a tenth of a second for that nerve to tell your brain, nope, not safe. Or
So it
yes, it's safe.
makes me think of autism too. I don't know too much about it, but I know that there's a lot with that not understanding the undertones and things like that. I wonder if there's
Yeah,
a connection there with the nerve.
maybe.
And then also, what about the people use the personality profiles a lot, like the DISC one, and so we were trained to, oh, that's a type A, or that's a D or an I, but and it could be for sure with the personalities, but it might be that if somebody's talking a lot and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're an I, it could mean that they're scared to death to come into the dentist, and and so you have to kind of be aware of these things too. That might be where intuition comes in as well.
Yes.
They
Yeah,
might not
because
want to
your
share photos just
trigeminal
because you think
nerve,
they're an eye. They want you to just be quiet and
yeah. So your fifth cranial nerve and your 10th cranial nerve are doing the same thing that your patients are. And so if you get a hit like that, pay attention to it and adjust accordingly.
I was going to say, like, also when you're speaking, because I'm used to doing presentations in front of people, and you get the feedback or the body language or the communication, and so it's great, where they're at, and then you do it over Zoom or you're doing a webinar, and it's so different. You think it'd be easier to do it over the computer, but it's not because you
No.
have no energy or no feedback. You don't know
Yeah.
what
Because
what
we're
you're
wired to
doing.
connect like that.
Yeah,
That's
that's
part of our nervous system wiring. When you can't see someone's facial expression, you cannot hear their tone of voice, that that connection is lacking.
yeah. Or if you put comics in your show, in a real presentation, you hear laughter, but then if you do it over the computer, it's just silent, so it's just awkward, and I just take them out at that point because you don't know what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yep.
April's
You're the
laughing.
comedian, Cindy.
No, well,
Oh,
some people say comedian. So with kids, I wonder if
Mhm.
that's why kids have no fear because they don't have a history of being traumatized yet, and so they run around and they don't fear anything because they've never experienced it. There's no warning sign.
Yeah, yeah. They have no stories written on their hippocampus. You know,
Yeah,
they
that's
they don't have a story that says if you jump off of the stairs from the top, you're going to get hurt at the bottom, right? They're
yeah,
just like, "Wow, I can do it," because they have no story.
yeah,
So that amygdala is not firing, not sending any signals because there's no story written on the hippocampus yet about what happens when you jump from the top of the steps.
yeah. So they need to jump so they can learn, right? Like
Kind of.
that's a good life lesson. You got to jump so you can learn. Yeah,
that brings up. I was thinking about pedo. You can't tell parents what to do, but you hear about kids are fearful of the dentist because their parents are like talking about needles or it's going to hurt, et cetera, et cetera. So they already implant that in the brain, so the kids are already fearful. I mean, how can we stop parents from doing?
So part of the other arm that I'm now working on is actually working with patients, so they have the tools they need to stay grounded when they come into our offices. So they maybe have had a negative experience. They already have a story, right? And you subconsciously, you're not trying to scare your kid, but your story, you're writing your story on their memory maker. And so teaching adults what is happening to them in that activated state, and giving them the tools to manage that state and co-regulating with them while they're in that state. Now they can teach their kids those skills. I just had a 5-year old not too long ago. He came with his mom, and I called his name, and his mom stood up in the chair and he stood up in the chair, and then as soon as he made eye contact with me, he hid behind his mom and grabbed her leg. And so I said his name, and I said, "Is it okay with you if mom comes back with us today?" And he looked at his mom, and she nodded, and he looked at me and I nodded, and he's like, "Yeah." So of course I was going to have mom back there. It was I wasn't in a pedo practice, it was a general practice. And so that's what he needed to feel safe. And so I just made it okay by asking his permission to get his permission for mom to come back. And so yes, mom can come back. And he sat in the chair and he said, "My tummy doesn't feel good." And I was like, "Buddy, good job. You described to me what's happening in your tummy. When I get a signal like that, it just means I need extra help." Now, that's his vagus nerve, right? When you do something scary, what happens? You get that knot in your stomach. And so was able to say what was happening somatically, but use his words. I don't think he was quite 5 yet. I think he was 4. So he described what was happening in his body. He's still connected to his body. He doesn't have all the stories written yet. We get nervous about something and we ruminate on it and we ignore what's happening in our body. That's backwards. He paid attention to what was happening in his body and verbalized it. And so I was like, "Good job explaining to me how you feel about being in the chair. When I get that feeling in my stomach, that just means I need to ask for extra help. I need someone to help me. And it's okay to ask for help." And so, like, I didn't shame him for having this feeling in his tummy. I validated that's what's supposed to happen when you're scared. And when you get that feeling in your I didn't use the word scared. When you get that feeling in your tummy, ask for help. That's okay. I'm here to help. And mom's here to help too. And so I also praised mom. I was like, "I don't know what you've taught him, but at this little bitty bit of an age, he can describe what's happening. So you've created safe space for him as well to say how he feels rather than be a big boy,
yeah,
don't be a baby."
yeah.
She had taught him to explain what's happening. And so I validated him and validated her for his being able to do that at such a young age. And, when she left, she was like, I didn't know how it was going to go today. I don't think it was his first visit. May have been. Now I can't remember. She's
Kids,
like, "I
it's
didn't know
hard to
how it was
tell.
going
Yeah,
to."
they could have a good
It
day one
wasn't
day.
because he'd come before and had a hard time. So I was like, she was like, "I didn't know how it was going to go today. It didn't go very well last time. And, I'm so grateful." And I was like, I'm just here to, make sure he feels okay with coming. If today wouldn't have worked out, we would have tried another day. But because we validated him, we got his permission, right? We asked if mom could come back, and everything we did, and that's another thing too, like the fear of the unknown with your patients escalates, elevates
Yes.
that response. And so the tell, show, do is the way to help deactivate the autonomic nervous system response. Tell them what you're going to do, show them how you're going to do it, and then do it. Don't do it and not explain what's happening. That fear of the unknown really can set a patient off. And so, when you're getting ready to do your intraoral exam, okay, so we're going to do a soft tissue screening today. You're going to feel me check your lips, cheeks, tongue. We're going to take a look at the roof of your mouth, the floor of your mouth, and the back of your throat. So describing all of that before you do it takes away the fear of the unknown. You're getting their permission by explaining what's going to happen, and then you do what you're going to do. And that helps them not feel like they don't have any control. As soon as you take away a patient's sense of control, or they feel disrespected in that situation, you're kind of setting yourself up to have difficulty with them.
Sometimes with kids, if they tell me that, like, they're nervous or scared, I say, "Oh, you're excited," or they say they're telling me whatever, I'm like, "Oh, you're just excited." Is that wrong to do that? Because I don't wanna confuse
Yeah.
because sometimes they
So
should be
typically,
scared, but
I wouldn't try to
or don't say
transpose it
scared.
into something else,
Uh-huh.
um, because now they've got a confused story written on the hippocampus. Like,
Mm.
she said, I'm excited, but I didn't feel excited. I actually felt scared.
Yeah, because with kids, it's so hard because 'cause you're programming them, so you really gotta be careful what you tell them. And then
Hmm.
sometimes lots of times, parents will come back with them, and I'll
Hmm.
ask the child, like, "Do you want bubble gum today or cherry?" And the kid will ask their mom, "Which one do I want?" Or the mom will say, "You like cherry, don't you?" I'm like, "Well, let the kid answer." Like, how do
Yeah.
they just answer for the child. They don't
Mhm.
validate the child's own decision whether they like cherry or bubble gum. They
Right.
like
Yeah.
cereal, they say
So,
no or
and we don't necessarily want to like go against a parent, but any way that we can connect with them, without, necessarily having that intermediary, like you said, let the kid make their own decisions. And some kids will be ready for that and they'll do it, and some kids aren't. And that'll just be a matter of just, creating disconfirming experiences with your patients. When they come into the treatment suite, they've got a story written already. They're looking for ways to prove the story's right. And so everything we do is an attempt to help them write a new story. So we don't want to confirm that going to the dentist is dangerous. We want to disconfirm that experience by showing them we're going to keep them safe. So that's another major goal I have with patients that are activated. It's all those first three things that we talked about, that's for everybody. But for your activated patient who's got difficulty with coming, my next goal is for every interaction that I have with them is to provide disconfirming experiences to help them write a new story that the dentist is a safe place.
Well, Yvonne, you've been a wealth of information today. There's things I've never even thought about or have thought about and never got a thorough explanation on it. So that's great. So thank you.
Thank you. And like Cindy said earlier, a lot of this stuff is intuitive. We do it. We don't know why we do it. But now neuroscience explains exactly why we do what we do. Either as someone who's having a difficulty with a certain situation, or someone who's trying to regulate with that patient while they get through it. So you may not have had the word. I didn't used to have the words for it, right? I didn't used to have the understanding of what was happening neurobiologically with a patient. But now that I do, we can apply all of these principles and techniques to help our patients get through these difficult situations.
And so how can we find you, or how can our listeners find you or find out about your trainings and courses?
That's an excellent question. So we are launching a brand new website. It should be up and running in the next few days. It's werisewellness.com. So WERISEWELLNESS.com. So when that's up and running, we're going to have actually you'll be able to download a tip sheet, 10 tips to stay grounded when your patient is not, right from the homepage there. So, my eventual goal is to create a certification program for dental practices who want to be trauma informed. And then, the next step will be to work directly with patients, building that patient audience who's interested. That's coming up in the offing, but right now it's werisewellness.com, and you can download that 10 tips to stay grounded when your patient is not.
I love it, and we'll post all the information in our show notes too, and also on our website, so you can find, Yvonne there, and hopefully we'll see her in Portland too for our big inaugural event. April's giving
Oh,
me
I
speech
love that.
lessons.
Inaugural, yes.
Inaugural.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you so
Yvonne.
much.
Much nice to meet you, April.
Nice to meet you too.
Okay.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.